In Plato's allegory of the cave, the issues really start at the beginning. When we first meet the prisoners in the cave, they are changed in place with only the shadows on the wall to inform them of the outside world. Since these shadows are all they can see, they assume that these must be what objects actually like. Not that they are, but that's all they know. This is similar to how people in the US are made to adopt imperialist attitudes starting from their childhood. History textbooks teach us that figures like Christopher Columbus, Andrew Jackson, Theodore Roosevelt are heroic figures who took a stand for American ideals in the face of adversity. In reality, they were flawed characters who used violence and deception to get what they wanted. Still, our society idolizes them because, as Roosevelt once said, our nation must behave as beseems the people with such responsibilities. In other words, the ends justify the means. But of course, just as the prisoner in the cave broke free of his chains and discovered how the shadows were made, Americans eventually became aware of the trap they had fallen into. During the Vietnam War, they witnessed all the pains of imperialism, the death, the destruction, and most of all, excruciating agony and defeat. Now that the consequences of imperialism had finally arrived at the doorstep, its failures were on full display. It was finally a chance for reflection, not just of the war itself, but to ponder whether a history was truly wrong. Even General Maxwell Taylor, Kennedy's most trusted general, had to admit, until we know the enemy and know our allies and know ourselves, we better keep out of this dirty business. So it seemed for a time that America could finally change its ways. Still, that's not to say it changes without growing pains. For the prisoner, it took time for his eyes to adjust to the light, and in those moments where it stung the most, he couldn't resist the run back to the dark. In the same way, America couldn't help but go back to its old domineering ways. Soon, society began to forget the lessons that it learned the hard way. Now imperialism had a new face, red and Russian, creeping closer and closer to America's shore. At the moment, it seemed that the only way to fight fire was with fire. So for almost 30 years, leaders like Nixon, Bush, Reagan towed the lines of aggressive behavior. It's almost as if Teddy Roosevelt had come back from the grave to whisper in their ear. In fact, the only thing that got them to stop was the humiliation of being caught red-handed.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages.
Old habits die hard, they say. Yet the future looks hopeful. The man finally realized he was prisoner no more when he could see the light clearly. America finally broke free of imperialism when people realized that they could challenge the status quo. People who could not only remember the lessons of the past, but learn from them, arrived to speak out whenever the bounds of power began to be pushed, resolute that the mistakes of the past shouldn't be repeated.
It's about time we have the courage to stand up and say to the President, Mr. President, you have not only put us in harm's way, you have harmed us.
A bold move in an age of conformity, but they say every wave begins with a single drop.